What if I told you that the reason she pulled away wasn't because you weren't enough, not funny enough, not successful enough, not good-looking enough, but because you talked too much? What if the very thing you were doing to win her over was the same thing pushing her further away? It's unsettling, right? But here's a truth most men never hear. The energy that captures a woman's mind isn't flashy. It's not loud. It's not performative. It's calm. A rare, almost unnerving kind of calm. The kind that walks into a room and doesn't try to dominate it, yet somehow owns it anyway. She doesn't want to be chased. Not really. She doesn't want to be smothered in compliments or flooded with constant attention. What she's secretly aching for, what she would never dare say out loud, is a man whose silence speaks louder than another man's performance. The kind of presence that doesn't demand the spotlight, but is the spotlight. You've seen him before. The one who says almost nothing and still makes everyone curious. The man who doesn't interrupt, who doesn't who doesn't need to be noticed, because he already knows exactly who he is. That's the man she wants. That's the man she remembers. And it's not about playing games or pretending to be cool. It's about a power that comes from within, a presence that says, I don't need you to see my worth to know it's there. Liam wasn't a model. He wasn't wealthy. He wasn't even talkative. Just a guy who sat alone every morning at a cafe on Venice Beach with a black notebook and a cup of dark roast. Sometimes he'd write. Sometimes he'd just watch the waves. People talked around him, walked past him, ignored him, and then they didn't. The same barista told me, he never flirts, never tries, but girls ask about him, constantly. There's something unsettling about how calm he is. That's the point. Stillness is disruptive, especially in a world that never shuts up. Psychologists call it emotional mirroring. Humans naturally absorb the emotional state of those around them. If you walk into a space jittery, seeking approval, anxious to please, she absorbs that, and subconsciously, she feels what you feel. You think you're being friendly, she feels suffocated. You think you're being expressive, she feels unsettled. But walk in with grounded, silent confidence, the kind that doesn't flinch under pressure, that doesn't apologize for its own presence, and everything shifts. She absorbs that too, and suddenly, she feels safe, intrigued, open. This is why Stoicism isn't just a philosophy, it's a force. A man who isn't enslaved by the need for validation is a man who radiates calm authority. Not dominance, not control, just solidity. The modern world has taught men to perform, to chase, to earn their way into a woman's heart with noise. But what most haven't realized is that her attraction lives in your stillness. She doesn't need you to prove you're strong. She needs to feel it, want to be that man. Start small. Go to a loud place, a coffee shop, a crowded park, and just sit. Don't look at your phone. Don't fidget. Don't try to start conversations. Just breathe, be still, and notice what happens around you. How people start looking at you differently. How women linger a second longer. How energy shifts. You're no longer seeking attention. You're commanding it without a word. This is the calm power she craves. Not the man who tries to win her over, but the one who invites her in, silently, confidently, and lets her choose to step closer. If this message hits something deep, if you're done performing and ready to become magnetic in your stillness, support this channel by subscribing now. Every sub tells us you want more content like this and gives us the fuel to keep going. And now, a little challenge to stir your thoughts. Which energy do you think she finds more attractive? A. The man who constantly reassures her with words and compliments. B. The man who says little, but is deeply grounded and present. Comment below with A or B. I'll be watching your answers. There's a kind of tiredness women carry that most men will never see. It doesn't show up as anger or frustration, not at first. It shows up as quiet, a kind of silence that doesn't mean peace, but rather surrender. Not because she doesn't care anymore, but because she's cared too much, for too long, without being met with the same depth. This silence is not the absence of emotion, it's the weight of emotions that have gone unseen for years. And the more a woman has endured, the more she begins to question if anyone will ever truly feel her, instead of fixing her. This is the hunger she won't speak aloud, the craving she carries behind every sigh, every dismissive "I'm fine." What she wants, deeply, desperately, isn't for someone to solve hurts, for someone to hold her. Experience without needing to change it. That's where most men miss it. They hear pain and immediately reach for a solution. They feel discomfort in her voice and try to patch it with logic. But emotion isn't a math problem, and pain doesn't always want a plan. What it wants, often, is to be recognized, to be sat with, to be felt. Evelyn had learned not to expect that. A writer based in Portland, she had carried the emotional weight of others her entire life. First as the eldest daughter in a chaotic home, then as a wife in 2 marriages, where her emotions were either too much or not enough. Over time, she built walls not to push people away, but to protect the most tender parts of herself. Until she met Jonah. Jonah wasn't the type you'd notice in a crowd. A retired Marine, now a quiet woodworker, he lived in rhythm with things that grew slowly. Trees, stillness, time. He never interrupted, never rushed. He spoke rarely, but when he did, it felt like the earth was listening. One day, while Evelyn sat across from him in her kitchen, the weight she'd been carrying finally slipped through her words. Mid-sentence, she froze. Her eyes clouded, and her voice went hollow. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. But something broke. Jonah didn't say a word. He didn't ask what was wrong. He simply stood up, walked over to the stove, poured her another cup of tea, and sat beside her. Close, present, not staring, not solving, just there. That moment, Evelyn would later write, was the first time she felt seen in a decade. That's the difference. Most men try to penetrate emotion with answers. But the rare man, the unforgettable one, holds emotion without needing to explain it. He doesn't flinch when she's raw. He doesn't retreat when she's quiet. He doesn't demand clarity before offering comfort. He's present because he chooses to be, not because he needs her to validate him for it. This is what the Stoics understood, that wisdom isn't found in having the right thing to say, but in knowing when not to speak at all. That real strength is the ability to sit with pain, not because you enjoy it, but because you respect it, because you understand that presence can do what words cannot. There's a reason this kind of man is unforgettable. He touches places in her that haven't been touched, not physically, but emotionally. Places so often ignored or misunderstood. Places that don't need fixing, only presence. And you don't need to wait until you've lived a lifetime like Jonah to become that kind of man. You start now. You start by noticing, by staying instead of fleeing, by choosing presence over performance. Next time she goes quiet, don't panic. Don't fill the silence. Sit beside it. Let her feel you there, not hovering, not demanding, but steady. And when she's ready, she'll speak. Not because you pulled her out, but because she finally felt safe enough to come out. That's how trust is built, not through grand declarations or polished words, but through the quiet discipline of showing up when it's uncomfortable and staying when it would be easier to leave. You want to be different. Be the man who doesn't try to fix her pain. Be the one who can stand beside it and not flinch. Because in a world full of men who interrupt, the one who listens with stillness becomes the one she never forgets. There's a moment every man will face. It doesn't come with warning. It arrives wrapped in emotion, tension, and chaos. It might look like a fight, sound like an accusation, or feel like a test. It's that moment when everything in your body wants to react, to raise your voice, to explain, to escape. But the man who truly knows his strength, the man who embodies masculine energy at its peak, he does something radically different. He remains still. Stillness in the face of chaos is not about being passive. It's about being anchored. It is the clearest sign of inner command. Most men are never taught that silence can be a weapon, that restraint can be power, that staying calm when provoked is not a weakness but the highest form of discipline. The truth is, when she brings you her fire, she is not always looking to burn you. Sometimes she is searching for something that won't collapse under her. Flame.Jared understood this only after learning the hard way. A firefighter in Austin, Jared was no stranger to pressure. He'd faced burning buildings, life or death rescues, adrenaline spikes that would overwhelm most. Bet when it came to emotional intensity in his relationship, he used to crumble. He'd try to fix, argue, raise his tone. He thought strength meant meeting force with force, until one night changed him. He came home late, drained, smelling of smoke. His girlfriend was already upset, hurt by a missed call, a forgotten promise. She was crying, her voice high and sharp, her pain louder than her words. Jared stood there, every muscle tense, wanting to defend himself, but something in him shifted. Instead of reacting, he inhaled deeply and let the breath slow him down. He walked over, sat down, and said nothing. She kept going. The anger, the hurt, the storm. But eventually, something happened. Her voice softened, her shoulders dropped. She exhaled, then walked toward him and rested her head on his chest. Not because he fixed anything, but because his stillness gave her space to collapse safely. This is what women feel before they understand the difference between presence and panic, between reaction and command. She may not be able to explain it in words, but she will always feel it in your energy. And she will never forget the man who knew how to hold her fire without flinching. Stillness is not the absence of emotion, it is the mastery of it. It means you've built enough strength within yourself that the outside world no longer dictates your reactions. It means you've trained your nervous system to pause instead of pounce. That pause, that breath, is everything. In Stoic philosophy, this is called the virtue of temperance. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events. This is not a metaphor, it's a muscle, and it grows every time you choose not to react. Try this next time you feel triggered. Count to 10 without saying a word. Let the emotion rise and fall without grabbing onto it. You'll notice how quickly the urge to lash out dissolves when you refuse to feed it, and what's left in its place is clarity. Women are not looking for men who overpower them. They are looking for men who do not get pulled into emotional storms like debris. They want to feel your calm, not as distance, but as safety. Because when you are calm, you allow her to stop performing strength. You give her permission to be soft. It's in the chaos that your real masculinity is revealed, not in the gym, not at the office, but in the everyday storms of relationship, where emotion runs high and logic runs low. The man who can sit in discomfort without shutting down, who can listen without interruption, who can respond without escalation, he is rare, and rare is remembered. Stillness is a skill, a decision, a form of leadership. The man who wields it doesn't just earn her respect, he earns her surrender, not because he demanded it, but because he proved through his energy that he could be trusted with it. Be that man, the one who doesn't flinch, the one who doesn't rush, the one who anchors, no matter how loud the world gets. Because in your calm, she finds the safety to feel, and in your stillness, she finally learns what real strength looks like. There is a moment, brief and electric, when eyes meet and everything else fades. No words, no movement, just the silent collision of two souls behind two pairs of eyes. It lasts only a second or two, but in that space, everything is revealed. In the way a man holds his gaze, a woman sees his truth, his fear or his calm, his performance or his presence, his need to be liked or his complete self-possession. And most men, when faced with that gaze, blink. But not Noah. Noah had a stillness in his eyes that unnerved people, not because it was cold, but because it was unwavering. A philosophy professor in Chicago, he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone who didn't need to prove anything. He rarely spoke in long sentences. He asked questions, listened more than he answered, and when he looked at you, he looked all the way in. Not in a way that tried to undress you or impress you, but in a way that said, "I see you, fully, and I am not afraid of what I find." His students felt it. They described his presence as unsettling, yet strangely comforting. One of them said, being in a room with Noah felt like standing in a cathedral. Not because of what he said, but because of how fully present he was. And it started with his eyes. Most men break eye contact too soon. They either look away out of discomfort, or hold on too long in a bid to dominate. Both are forms of insecurity. One reveals fear, the other reveals overcompensation, but a steady, grounded gaze that neither chases nor challenges, that simply holds space with calm, is one of the most powerful things a man can offer, especially in a world where most people are either performing or hiding. The truth is, your eyes are the most honest part of you. They can't fake presence. They can't fake security. When you're unsure of yourself, your eyes show it. When you want to be liked, your gaze becomes restless. But when you are centered, when you are not seeking or hiding, your gaze becomes a doorway to a depth she rarely encounters. This kind of eye contact isn't about seduction. It's about integrity. It's about being so rooted in who you are that you can hold someone's gaze without needing them to look back with approval. That is the gaze that melts armor, not by force, but by honesty. Women notice this. They may not always verbalize it, but they feel it. They feel when a man is performing. They feel when a man is seeking validation. And they feel when a man is simply there, fully, without pretension, without rush. That kind of gaze disarms them, not because it demands attention, but because it commands presence. If you want to cultivate this, you have to start with yourself. You have to get comfortable holding your own reflection. Practice looking in the mirror without judging, without correcting, without blinking. Just look, see what's there. Learn to be with your own presence. Until you can do that, you'll always be slightly off when facing someone else, because you'll still be looking for approval. But once you're at peace with what you see in yourself, your gaze becomes a resting place for others. The gaze that melts armor is not intense. It is steady. It does not chase. It invites. It says, "I do not need to impress you, but I am not afraid of you either." It creates a kind of space that allows a woman to relax into herself, to stop performing, to soften. Because the truth is, women are surrounded by men who either look past them or try too hard to see into them. The ones who simply meet them as they are, without leaning in or backing away, are unforgettable. When you can look at her and not flinch, when you can meet her eyes without asking for anything, you become the kind of man who stays in her memory long after the room is empty. Not because of your charm or your lines, but because of your stillness. Because in your eyes, she saw something rare, someone who wasn't searching, someone who was already home. There is a difference between a man who moves to impress and a man who moves with purpose. One is chasing applause. The other is following something deeper. You can feel it when they walk into a room. The first speaks louder, trying to capture attention. The second often says nothing, but everyone notices anyway. The first runs on momentum, needing others to validate his energy. The second burns slow, steady, focused. It is this second man who leaves an impression. Not because he tried, but because he lived in alignment. Caleb never needed to say much about what he did. You could feel it in the way he moved. A sculptor, living in New Orleans, Caleb lived with a rhythm that most men had forgotten. He rose early, walked to his workshop before the city fully woke up, and spent hours shaping stone in silence. He didn't post about his work. He didn't tell everyone his dreams. He didn't need to. His discipline spoke louder than any declaration ever could. One day, a journalist came to interview him for a local magazine. She expected conversation, explanations, passionate monologues about vision and inspiration. Instead, Caleb offered stillness. He answered simply, thoughtfully, never performing. She later wrote that she was more affected by the way he moved through space than by anything he said. Because purpose, when real, is not loud, it is rooted. This is what most men miss. They believe passion is enough, that if they're intense enough, excited enough, expressive enough, it will be magnetic. But passion without direction is just noise. It burns hot and dies quickly. Women may feel the spark, but they rarely trust it. What they trust is what stays consistent, even when no one is watching. They trust the man whose purpose is not a performance, but a way of life. There's a kind of calm that radiates from a man who knows what he is building. It doesn't matter what that thing is. It could be a business, a body of art, a family, a vision. What matters is that it is his, that it matters to him, that he wakes up and moves toward it without needing anyone to clap. Women feel this. It's not something you need to say. In fact, when you say too much about it, it often dilutes its power. Purpose is felt in the pauses, in the choices you make when no one's looking, in the way you respond when life tests your patience, in how you show up when it would be easier not to. It's in your tone, your timing, your focus. It's in the way you move through space. When a man has no direction, he becomes chaotic. He leans too hard on women to give him stability. He becomes reactive, dependent, emotional in all the wrong ways. But when a man has anchored his identity in a mission larger than himself, he becomes unshakable. He is not moved by temporary highs or lows. He is not threatened by silence, and he does not need to chase validation, because he already has clarity. Epictetus once said, "Do not explain your philosophy, embody it." This is what purpose looks like. It doesn't need explanation. It doesn't require a resume. It reveals itself in the way you live. Women don't need to be told what matters to you. They can see it in your eyes, in your schedule, in your silence. If you want to become that man, stop trying to impress. Start building. Pick something and commit. Not for the world to see, but because your soul needs it. Wake up earlier, create structure, protect your time, and most importantly, learn to enjoy the process without the applause. There is nothing more powerful than a man who is deeply rooted in what matters to him. He is not reactive. He is aligned. And in a world filled with distractions, he becomes magnetic. Because he doesn't just offer excitement. He offers stability, direction, a space where she doesn't have to lead everything herself. She may not say it, but she is tired of carrying the full emotional weight of every relationship. What she craves is not a man with wild ambition, but a man who moves with intention, who knows where he's going, and lives like it. She doesn't want to be your purpose. She wants to meet you along the path of it. So let your purpose be the loudest thing about you. Let it guide how you show up, in every conversation, every relationship, every challenge. And when you do, you won't need to speak it. She will feel it, without words. There is a quiet power in the man who knows when to stay and when to walk away. It is not about ego. It is not a threat or a game. It is the final form of self-respect. The ability to detach with grace, without resentment, is a rare strength. And in that rare strength lies a kind of magnetism that most men never discover. Because the truth is, women do not fall for the man who clings. They fall for the man who can let go and still remain whole. Andre understood this in a way that few ever do. At 61, after decades of military service and the quiet solitude that followed, he had learned to live with simplicity. He moved to Sedona, where the red rock canyons stretched endlessly into the sky, and where silence was not emptiness, but presence. That is where he met Rosa. She was vibrant, fierce, self-reliant, the kind of woman who had spent most of her life building a world that no one could break. Her edges were sharp from years of survival. She had no time for weakness and no tolerance for control. But with Andre, she softened, not because he tried to change her, not because he persuaded her, but because he remained completely himself. Andre didn't chase. He didn't argue. He didn't try to make her feel safe with words. He let his presence speak. And when she pushed him away during moments of emotional turbulence, he didn't flinch. He didn't collapse or beg. He simply stepped back. Not out of punishment, but because he had nothing to prove. That was the turning point. Because Rosa realized something most women rarely get to feel. She could let go of control, and the man beside her would not crumble. He would not manipulate. He would not withdraw to punish. He would stay true to his center and let her come back when she was ready. If she didn't, he would keep walking, not with bitterness, but with peace. This is magnetic detachment. It is the quiet knowing that your value does not increase or decrease based on someone else's choice to stay. It is the ability to love fully without losing yourself. It is the wisdom to remain emotionally available, but never emotionally dependent. Most men confuse detachment with indifference, but the two are nothing alike. Indifference lacks care. Detachment holds care without gripping. It is the subtle art of remaining open while never abandoning yourself in the process. And women can feel this. They feel when your calm is real, when your peace is earned, when your love is offered freely, not out of need, but out of abundance. Andre didn't need Rosa to complete him. He didn't make her his mission. He simply included her in the life he had already built. That made all the difference. Because women do not want to be the reason a man exists. They want to join a man who is already whole, who can invite them in without losing his way. If you want to step into this kind of strength, start by practicing emotional boundaries. Not walls, but boundaries. Ask yourself what you tolerate out of fear of loss. What behaviors you excuse because you are afraid to be alone. Then ask yourself who you become when someone steps away. Do you collapse or do you stay grounded? The man who can walk away is not the one who loves less. He is the one who has loved himself long enough to never need to beg for what should be freely given. He is not afraid of goodbye because he trusts that what is meant for him will stay, and what isn't will create space for something truer. Women are drawn to this, not because you play hard to get, but because your energy says, I choose you, but I do not need to possess you. I will be here as long as this is honest, and if it stops being honest, I will leave with grace. When you embody this, everything changes. Your words carry more weight. Your silence speaks louder. You stop trying to prove yourself and start living with quiet conviction. And in that stillness, in that unwavering trust in your own path, you become magnetic. So do not be afraid to detach. Do not be afraid to walk alone. Because the man who can walk away when something no longer aligns is the man who never loses himself in love. He remains whole. He remains steady. And in a world full of desperate noise, that kind of peace is the loudest thing of all. In a world that often shouts for attention, where noise is mistaken for value and performance is mistaken for purpose, there lived a man named Andre who never raised his voice, never begged to be seen, and never chased what didn't feel aligned with truth. He didn't set out to be impressive. He set out to be whole. And that wholeness is what every woman he encountered could feel without needing it explained. Through Andre's journey from quiet observer to grounded presence, we saw more than just a man aging with grace. We witnessed the rare transformation of a man who embodied strength without force, intimacy without dependency, and leadership without domination. Every stage of his life taught him something most men spend their whole lives trying to avoid. That real power lies not in control, but in calm. That presence, not pressure, is what makes you unforgettable. When Andre met Rosa in the stillness of Sedona's red desert, he had already lived a life full of extremes, battlefields, heartbreak, loss. He knew what it meant to be stretched by chaos, but it was in the quiet, after the battles, where he discovered who he really was. And that version of him, the one that didn't need to perform, that didn't fear silence, was the one Rosa felt safe enough to love. This is the essence of true masculinity. It is not loud. It is not reactive. It is not built to impress. It is built to contain. Andre didn't melt Rosa's armor by demanding she take it off. He melted it by standing firm while she figured out if she could. He didn't lead her with rules or logic. He led her with calm, consistent energy. And that leadership allowed her to finally exhale. What we learned from Andre, from Liam, from Jonah, from Caleb and Noah, is that women don't want perfect men. They want men who are anchored. Men who can listen without trying to fix. Who can stay without clinging. Who can look them in the eyes without flinching. Who know where they're going and walk that path with or without applause. We live in a culture that rewards noise, that tells men to hustle harder, speak louder, perform better. But all of that is a trap if it's not rooted in stillness. True confidence isn't about making noise. It's about knowing you don't need to. And that's what these men, especially Andre, revealed to us. They showed us that being grounded doesn't mean being passive. It means being selectively powerful, choosing your energy, protecting your peace, moving with clarity instead of chaos. And this isn't just a story to admire from a distance. This is a way of life you can choose today. You don't have to wait until life humbles you. You can choose to start showing up differently right now. Start by observing yourself in your most reactive moments. Pause instead of respond. Notice when you're trying to impress instead of express. Practice being present without needing to perform. Learn to sit in silence and let it speak louder than your words ever could. Build a life that you're proud of, not because others are watching, but because it aligns with your values, because it makes you feel solid inside, and most importantly, stop tying your worth to her reaction. Your strength is not measured by how much attention you get. It's measured by how steady you remain when no one is clapping, when you can hold your calm in chaos, when you can lead without force, when you can love without losing yourself. That's when you become magnetic. That's when you become unforgettable. So now the question turns to you. After hearing Andre's journey and all the lessons woven through these men's lives, how does this resonate with your own path? Which part of this story spoke to you the most? Was it the stillness, the presence, the quiet leadership, or the ability to walk away without resentment? Let us know in the comments below. Share your perspective. Your story might just be the message another man needs to hear today. And if you felt something shift inside you while watching this, if something clicked, if you thought this is who I want to be, support this channel by hitting subscribe. It helps us keep creating powerful, honest content like this. And most importantly, it reminds us that you're walking this path too. Because this isn't just about being liked. It's about becoming a man who can no longer be ignored. Speak less, hold more power, and let the world feel your presence before you even say a word.